Welcome to Open Spaces from Wyoming Public Radio News. I'm Camila Kadelska. The man who allegedly ran down a wolf on a snowmobile last year has been indicted. We get updated on the case.
I'll be very interested to see what that was that convinced the grand jury that he was guilty.
And it's now up to the courts. And the number of rural hospitals delivering babies is dwindling, so midwives are stepping up to help low-risk women.
We take on women who are experiencing normal physiological pregnancy.
Town and cities in the state have made over $12 million so far this year from historic horse racing machines.
The kind of algorithm for a spin is based on horse races from history, not pure chance.
Those stories and more, stay with us. This is Open Spaces.
Can't have the radio on all day but want to keep up to date with Wyoming news? Then check out our new daily podcast, the Wyoming Debrief. Get daily news around Wyoming and test your knowledge of the Cowboy State with some trivia. All of that in under 10 minutes. Find Wyoming Debrief wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to Open Spaces from Wyoming Public Radio News. I'm Camila Kadelska. First, we'll hear more about one of Wyoming's biggest stories of the month. It has to do with Sublette County's Cody Roberts. 18 months ago, he allegedly ran down a wolf with a snowmobile, which is legal in Wyoming, but then brought the live injured animal into a local bar. That part resulted in a $250 game and fish fine for possession of live wildlife. But now there's been some major developments. Wyoming Public Radio's Caitlin Tan and Wyophile's Mike Kosmerl have covered this extensively. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Hey, Camila, great to be here.
So, Caitlin, what's the latest update?
So in mid-August, Sublette County's Cody Roberts was charged with felony animal cruelty. And this comes about a year and a half after the actual incident.
Got it. And to be clear, the Sublette County attorney opened a case against Roberts, and that remained open this entire time.
Yeah, correct. When this blew up into the media, the sheriff and the county attorney on the side basically said that they were cut out of the initial response. The sheriff said he didn't even know about the incident. And so they opened their own investigation, a month after Game and Fish adjudicated their part of it. And I would just emphasize that there really was disagreement. The Wyoming Game and Fish Department put out press releases stating that animal cruelty statutes were not applicable to predatory animals. Well, that's exactly what he was just indicted for, animal cruelty to a predatory animal. And so I guess it'll be for the courts to decide, if the Game and Fish had the incorrect interpretation of that statute.
So you fast forwarded it a little to this summer. So we started hearing rumblings that the Sublette County's prosecutor was forming a grand jury. Caitlin, what does that mean?
Yeah, so a grand jury it's actually this legal tool that's rarely used in the state system. It's essentially a jury that decides whether a prosecutor should move forward with criminal charges at all, but it's definitely meant to happen under this cloak of secrecy. So with this case, we know that there was 12 random Sublette County residents that sat on the jury with one alternate, and that they heard from witnesses, and it took at least 9 of them to make that decision that there's enough evidence to move forward with felony charges for Cody Roberts. But that's truly about all we know. In fact, Mike and I really only knew about the grand jury happening because of information that was leaked.
It was a big discussion at Wildfile over whether or not to cover it because, the potential that publicity could create situations where jurors are being intimidated. In statute, it is supposed to be confidential. All the legal filings associated with it are all sealed, so the public doesn't have access to it. It is meant to protect the identity of witnesses, prevent evidence from being destroyed. So as the prosecution now in an open court proceeds against Cody Roberts, that evidence could be essentially like kind of plucked from the sealed bucket, and then end up coming in public view. So I'll be very interested to see what that was that convinced the grand jury that he was guilty. One quirk of a grand jury is that it is the prosecutor providing expert testimony, or eyewitnesses are providing testimony, and it's all kind of orchestrated by the prosecuting attorney. In this case, it was Clayton Milinkovich, the elected county attorney in Sublette County. But Cody Roberts isn't sitting there in the courtroom. He does not have a defense attorney. Now that he's been indicted, he has hired a defense attorney. I was told it's Elizabeth Trifonis. She's an attorney out of Jackson. But in that grand jury process, yeah, there's no defense.
The other interesting part with the grand jury is I know some grand jury experts, they sometimes speculate that a prosecutor chooses this option to insulate themselves from a controversial decision. So instead of a county attorney making direct charges, they can say that the grand jury made this decision. Mike, you were able to get an interview with Clayton Milinkovich, the county attorney in Sublette County. He did say otherwise, right?
Clayton emphatically said that is not the case, that was not in his mind. He said essentially it came down to the fact that the case was at a gridlock because eyewitnesses were not willing to provide testimony and cooperate in their investigation. And so we know that there were dozens of people that flowed through the Green River Bar that night, but none of those people were willing to talk. But the grand jury provided Clayton with the ability to subpoena people. And so they legally were required to provide testimony.
Got it. And so Cody Roberts has officially been charged. Mike, how does this move forward now?
My understanding is that there will be an initial appearance where they explain the charge, and then there will be an arraignment. And that arraignment is where Cody Roberts will decide whether or not to plead guilty of felony animal cruelty or not guilty and fight the charge.
Got it. And have we heard anything directly from Roberts?
I think Caitlin and myself have both attempted to interview Cody to no avail. I have not seen any public remarks from him since this all happened in February 2024. I reached out to his attorney and did not receive a call back.
Just to be clear, we don't have dates yet. And we also don't know if it'll for sure make it to a trial.
I mean, I think in a general sense, we should expect to see the proceedings unfold in the fall. There could be a plea bargain, that prevents a trial, and there also could be a trial.
Okay, and Mike, after the charge, you went to Sublette County and heard what residents were thinking. What did you hear?
It is a really controversial issue that has divided the community, and I did encounter kind of the whole diversity of opinions. People who thought Cody had been unfairly vilified. One resident I spoke to said on the record that he's not a psychopath, and actually called him a good dad, someone who knew him personally. And I think was really not looking forward to the spotlight being back on Sublette County, which was really intense, resulted in a lot of trolling, a lot of threats. One anecdote that I think can help people understand what it was like is that all the online booking systems, like reservation systems, whether you wanted to get a table at a restaurant or you wanted to get your nails done, all those systems had to be taken down for some amount of time because people from around the world were essentially trolling these businesses and taking all the slots with no intention of actually going. And so that's kind of what it was like. And I think folks are not looking forward to that. On the other side of the coin, I did also interview people who were like, I'm so glad that this is happening. This has been a black eye. It was a long time coming. Cody Roberts deserves to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Well, thanks for talking with us. Both of you will be continuing to report on this. For Mike's reporting, you can go to wyofile.com. And for Caitlin's coverage, you can go to wyomingpublicmedia.org. Rural hospitals are not delivering as many babies as they used to. In the past 2 years, 4 labor and delivery services have closed in our state. That's led to a return to midwives to help fill the gaps around our region. Wyoming Public Radio's Hannah Merzbach takes us to one birth center in southern Wyoming.
Near an I-80 off-ramp in Evanston, across from a Chevrolet dealership, there's an old white house. Upstairs, it has a tattoo shop.
We'll have screaming down here and screaming up there.
Because down here, midwife Jana Hartzell delivers babies.
This is the birth room.
Aside from the inflatable tub for water births, the vibrant space looks like a bedroom, with a queen-size bed, purple walls, and yellow curtains.
To make it feel like you're at home when you're having your baby versus like cold, sterile hospital feeling.
Midwives specialize in natural births and fewer drugs. They don't have as many years of education as OBGYNs, but are trained to handle low-risk clients and transfer them to a hospital if things don't go according to plan.
We take on women who are experiencing normal physiological pregnancy.
The idea for the birth center first came about when the local hospital delivery unit shut down last year. It said it didn't have enough patients and was one of 100 rural units to shut down since 2020 amid rising costs.
What are people going to do now?
In Evanston, the situation left many pregnant people driving at least an hour to Utah.
Some people don't have a way of getting down there.
So Hartzell and another midwife pooled their money and opened the birth center. Others, like Sarah Morey, are doing the same. She co-founded a center in Cheyenne a couple years ago, but said there's still some challenges around insurance.
We're basically eating $4,000 to $5,000 per client.
Specifically those on Medicaid, which in Wyoming doesn't cover the fees that go towards birth center facilities and administration. Morey is lobbying to fix this with state lawmakers, many who already see midwifery as a way to fill care gaps. But there are other hurdles.
It's then the hands-on training.
In order to get a degree, midwives need to attend a certain number of births in person. And there's just not enough midwives to teach them.
It's hard to feel confident without finding high-volume centers to apprentice at.
In states like New Mexico, where there's state-sponsored apprenticeship and a long-standing nurse-midwife university program, which Abby Reese runs.
Community traditions were preserved.
She says midwives were marginalized decades ago by mainstream medicine, but in New Mexico, Indigenous and Hispanic communities help keep the practice alive. There, many state lawmakers are on board.
Who will say something along the lines of, my grandmother was a midwife, or I was born at home.
In New Mexico, midwives attended more than a quarter of births in 2021, twice the average of other states in the region. But Reese wants even more most care to come from midwives, like in some European countries.
With physicians in consultative roles, so that we can leverage that precious workforce.
Some states have a shortage of physicians, OBGYNs, including Idaho and Wyoming, where lawmakers have passed abortion bans. Those states are training family care doctors to fill the void and take on more complicated pregnancies. And Arizona, Montana, and Nevada recently launched nurse-midwife university programs. For 19-year-old Rustin Mitchell, midwives are part of the solution. She had her first baby in that Evanston birth room.
There was a point where I was like, oh my God, I can't do this. Somebody give me some drugs.
But she pushed through, and afterwards got a home-cooked meal from midwife Jana Hartzell.
Jana cooked me a pulled pork sandwich, gave me a nice glass of orange juice, sliced cheesecake. I was on top of the world.
And she felt at home with her healthy baby boy. For Wyoming Public Radio, I'm Hannah Merzbach in Evanston.
The small community of Shoshone relies on its senior center for a good meal and good company, but there's some uncertainty about its future. That's up next on Open Spaces.
Wyoming Public Media is providing Wyoming and Western wildfire updates on air and now online. Go to wyomingpublicmedia.org and click on Wyoming Wildfire Info. You'll find links to the latest updates on fires around the region, along with information on current air quality conditions, fire restrictions, information on protecting your property, and more. Find it all in one place at wyomingpublicmedia.org.
Welcome back to Open Spaces. Juana Summers has been the co-host of NPR's afternoon news show, All Things Considered, for the past 3 years. But she got her start interning at a member station with a drive to cover politics. As NPR comes under scrutiny for alleged political bias and federal funding for both the national network and its member station newsrooms dries up, Summers says the national-local partnership is more important now than ever.
So I started working in public media when I was in college at KBIA in Columbia, Missouri, which is affiliated with the University of Missouri's journalism school. And I was very intently focused on political journalism then. This would have been in the mid-2000s. So I was able to cover the presidential campaigns of Barack Obama and John McCain at the time. And I think that was the thing that really stuck with me is, as a college student working for a local member station, being able to spend time in the state of Missouri covering both of those candidates back in the day when Missouri was a really big swing state and a big prize for both political parties. And it really lit a fire in me and was what set me on the course of ultimately becoming a political correspondent for NPR.
Was there anything that made your work for the local station more meaningful at that time?
I think being able to serve a local audience was really important to me, and knowing that the stories that I did were really making a difference in people's lives who lived in the surrounding area around the member station that I worked for, who were affiliated with the university and the other universities that were in Columbia. I think that was what made the biggest difference, is knowing I was able to have that local impact on people's everyday lives.
Right. And then what stood out to you back then as the pros and cons of the relationship between the local member station and NPR, the national network?
I think, obviously, as a young and ambitious journalist, one of the big pros was obviously knowing that I had the opportunity to not just do stories that folks in my local community could hear, but that potentially could be heard and seen nationally as well, was a big perk. Being able to explain to them what life was like there, to give that sort of firsthand expertise that you only have from being a local journalist who knows and lives in your community, and being able to bring that into the national spotlight was something that felt was really important to me.
Why does NPR turn to local stations for reporting on their area?
There is no substitute for that firsthand knowledge that you have from living in and covering a community intently over the years. I know when a breaking news story happened, the first thing that I often do is to get online and go to the website of a local member station to see how they're covering the story. Who are they speaking to? What are the voices and perspectives that they are centering? That is something that as a journalist just can't be replaced. I will never be able to get that kind of knowledge if I fly into your community and cover a national story. So I'm looking for that local expertise and that local authority. And I know that when we have a big breaking news story, it's one of the biggest thrills for me when I'm able to introduce a reporter or a correspondent from that local community and bring those stories to our national air so that everybody can benefit from that local expertise.
So you've been in the hosting seat at NPR as the networks faced accusations of liberal bias. A few questions here. What do you see your newsroom doing to ensure balanced, fair, and nuanced political coverage?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I think it's a good conversation that we're having. Our mission as NPR, as public media, is to serve the entire nation, and that means that we have a responsibility to reflect political diversity, economic diversity, the social differences that exist in this country and around the world. There have been a lot of really fruitful and robust conversations on a variety of topics about how we do that. And I think we're constantly challenging ourselves to do more and to do better. Look, I'm a former political correspondent. I've covered politics for the majority of my career before I became a host. And those conversations have been going on for a long time. We care really deeply about making sure that we understand how to accurately cover difference and divide. And I think the way that you do that, and you do it well, is by continuing to have the conversation, continuing to check our own biases, to have conversations with the diverse staffers that work in this newsroom, and to allow that to inform our storytelling. I think NPR has talked publicly. We've made some additional editorial enhancements that are focused on making the journalism more robust, to making sure that every story that comes out the door, whether it is on air or online, is well vetted, well sourced, and meets our standards. And I expect that work to continue.
Can you give me an example of a recent story where maybe you guys have gone through that discussion and how you decided maybe you needed to add more sources or get a different perspective to kind of help dial that in?
I will say it's not one story. We have that conversation with just about every story we do. I'll give you one example. When we're talking with newsmakers, for example, I interview a lot of politicians, a lot of people across the political spectrum. My first call is to our Washington desk, our political correspondents, our congressional correspondents, our White House correspondents who know those beats and cover them day in, day out, and say, hey, this is the person I'm interviewing today. What are the questions I should be asking them? What are the things I don't want to miss? And then I'm having conversations with people on our team. What are the perspectives we need to include? Is there anyone we need to reach out to in terms of getting a fair response from if there's an allegation made in an interview? Those are conversations that as hosts we're having every single day, no matter what side of the aisle someone might come from, to make sure that we're telling the fullest, most accurate version of the story and providing our listeners and our audience with the context they need to make sense of a situation.
Member stations like Wyoming Public Media often have deeper trust from their audience. We're in the community, we're reflecting the more conservative politics that at least dominate our state. What do you think newsrooms like ours need to do to hold on or build on that trust?
I mean, I think member stations like yours are in a unique position because you live in the community that you serve. People are having face-to-face interactions with you, and many times they know you because you go to church with their kids or go to school with their kids, and you're in the community. You're running into them at the grocery store. So leveraging those personal relationships, I think, is really important, and to provide those thoughtful stories that help them better navigate their everyday decision making, to help them form stronger ties and social bonds within their community is just really important.
And Congress's vote to rescind previously approved funding for public media stations is potentially going to lead some smaller NPR member stations, but not Wyoming Public Media, to significantly scale back their local news coverage or even close, particularly in rural areas. How will this impact NPR's ability to cover all of America and its ability to maintain the local and national dialogue that we know this partnership as today?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that this partnership is critically important to how we continue to fulfill our mission as public media to serve the entire nation. We could not do that without all of the incredible work that goes on at member stations across the country, like Wyoming Public Media and others. I think this is a moment, obviously, of challenge where we're going to have to reimagine and rethink some of the ways in which we do things, but we're not shying away from that mission. That is something we have to keep doing. We have to reflect that diversity. We have to serve everyone. So I think we're just going to be thinking about what that looks like. But I think that one thing that I don't expect to change is the fact that having a network of member stations across the country who know their communities better than anyone else and who can report on them authentically in the moment, that's not going away. We'll have to think differently. We'll have to work together. And it's a challenge that we'll all work through together.
Juana Summers, co-host of NPR's All Things Considered, thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Now let's hear one of those local impact stories Summers says are so critical. Shoshone is a small town outside Riverton, less than 500 people according to the 2020 census. There's one gas station on the corner and a lot of boarded up businesses. And the Shoshone Senior Center is the only place in town that regularly serves a hot meal. The center is not just for seniors. It's also the polling site and the food pantry. It's the spot for weddings, memorials, game nights, AA meetings. It even hosts the town's haunted house in the basement every Halloween. But there's a lot of uncertainty about the future of these kind of centers, as the Trump administration considers how to fund the Older Americans Act and other sources of funding fluctuate. Wyoming Public Radio's Hannah Haberman spent the day at the Shoshone Senior Center to hear what's at stake.
It's Wednesday, Spaghetti Day. Pods of people chat and sip coffee at long rectangular tables as they wait for lunch. Doreen and Carl Freeman are sitting by the juice machine.
We usually come down every day. It's open 5 days a week, and it's very helpful for us elderly people to have a place to come and visit and a meal every day.
They live in an apartment down the street.
We've been in Shoshone for about 63 years.
The two have been married even longer. They met in Montana when Doreen was in high school and Carl was working in the oil fields.
He more or less picked me up on a street corner. And we have been happy for 65 years, so I'm sure we're good.
The couple says the senior center has a lot going for it.
We always have a puzzle going here, and I love puzzles. And in the other room, they have a library, and I I'll do a lot of reading, and we don't have to check them out. We just take what we want and bring them back when we're done.
And then we have exercise equipment too, which is good for us.
Both Doreen and Carl say if the center didn't exist, people would probably just stay at home.
We'd be bound to our apartment all the time or driving on the road, and that wouldn't be smart. So
Centers like these already run on tight margins, but recent shakeups in funding are creating big concerns for the two people steering the ship.
I'm Jeannie Cronky, and I am the assistant director here at the Shoshone Senior Center.
I'm Ricky Neal. I am the director.
Neal is the behind-the-scenes introvert, tapping away at her computer in the back office. And Cronky's the upfront extrovert, running the kitchen and daily activities.
I think about what if we lost this, and where would they go, and what would they do, and a lot of them can't get to Riverton. We are the only transportation for some of them.
The center also offers frozen leftover meals for $2 and does home delivery.
Some of them have said this will be their only meal that they get. If it wasn't for us, they wouldn't eat.
Neal says about 75% of the center's money comes from the federal Older Americans Act. That's under the Department of Health and Human Services, which the Trump administration reorganized this spring. The change brought up a bunch of questions about program funding.
Right now it's looking like those will be level funded, which sounds great, but we have a rapidly aging population, so the need is increasing.
That's not the only thing in flux. Neal says funding to the town's special district for senior citizens will likely decrease because of cuts to property taxes. And it's hard to fundraise in a small town.
All of the sources of income are going down, so we're constantly being asked to do more with less.
Less and less is something Shoshone's seen more and more of in recent years.
There used to be stores all along each side of the street out there. They're all gone.
Lois Herbst is another center regular. She even has her own parking spot. She's been in Shoshone for almost 70 years.
I come here to talk to people because I live alone and my neighbors are busy ranch people.
Herbst is a longtime advocate for ranchers and private property rights. She's also the first and only woman to be elected president of the Wyoming Stock Growers Association back in 2005.
Talking really is good medicine for an old person, and I am 92. You gain from friendship with other people. You've known that all your life. You didn't go to school and hide in a corner. You went out and made friends.
When it comes to possible funding cuts to senior centers like Shoshone's, Herbst says,
I can't see why they would start with something that the oldest group appreciates, and we're the ones that have built this country.
Congress needs to hash out the federal budget before the end of September to avoid a government shutdown. For Wyoming Public Radio, I'm Hannah Haberman in Shoshone.
The horse racing industry is exploding right now, but what is it really? We'll learn more. Stay with us. This is Open Spaces.
My name is Sarah Mikesell Growney. I live in Sheridan, Wyoming. Honestly, I am just a lover of the news. One of my very first childhood memories is da, 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 da. And I continue to take in all of it. It's so hard anymore to find balanced news where it's not just a bunch of people pontificating and throwing ideas out there that see if they stick. So I feel like I walk away from Wyoming Public Radio educated and ready to have any conversation. It's my most valued news source that I listen to or read, and why would I not pay for it? Thank God we have federal funding, but obviously every year or every new administration that's threatened, and it concerns me greatly. So I will donate. I will always donate. Quite frankly, it's my absolute most valued source of news, entertainment, you name it.
Welcome back to Open Spaces from Wyoming Public Radio. I'm Camila Kadalska. Wyoming's horse racing industry is exploding right now. Some of the biggest purses in the state's history are happening this summer, and off-track betting locations are popping up across the state. But the industry's rapid growth has left some asking. What power do local governments and residents have to regulate the influx of betting sites, horse races, and revenue? Lawmakers have been working on bills to address the bubbling conflict, and Wyoming Public Radio's Jordan Uplinger has been tracking them in a social media series. Hey, Jordan.
Hey, Camila.
Okay, I want to get to what lawmakers are working on, but maybe you can help us understand this industry first. There's horse racing, historic horse racing, and then pari-mutuel wagering?
Yeah, a lot of moving parts. But let's start at the beginning. In one form or another, racing has been with Wyoming for well over 100 years. There were big races like the 1908 Evanston to Denver horse race, smaller races like the horse-pulled sled races, and we found pictures circa the early 1900s that looked like more standard race events that people would be familiar with today. Around the 70s, simulcasting was legalized alongside the creation of the 100-mile rule. This means live horse races could be broadcast, allowing people to bet money even if they aren't present at the race itself. The 100-mile rule, which is a really old rule, means that when a live race event is taking place, off-track betting locations within 100 miles had to close in an effort to get people to that track.
So in the past, the focus really was being physically at the racetrack for events. Why did the industry falter?
Well, for one thing, horse racing is expensive. Owners treat their horses the way celebrities might treat a prized classic car. You bring it out for a showing or an event, but the rest of the time is spent keeping that car in pristine condition. Equally, horses require dental care, deworming, vaccination, a strict diet, regular training, means of transportation, stable environment for rest. By the 90s, a cultural fall-off had begun. Horse racing was becoming old school, losing out to more popular sports in viewership. Younger people were more likely to watch baseball or basketball as opposed to a sport where the animal might end up dying on the track. Enter the 2000s, and betting on a race has to compete with online sports betting. By 2009 and 2010, there were 0 horse races in the state hosted for the first time in 42 years. The heydays, if you will, were long gone.
Yet today, we see towns like Evanston running out of hotel space for a single day racetrack event. How did it go from a cultural pastime to a major moneymaker today?
Well, like a dark horse, politics was playing out in the background. If we back up a bit to 2003, these things called historic horse racing machines started popping up. Track owners and supporters of the sport took a trip to Kentucky, which was attempting to revive their industry.
They came back and told lawmakers that these HHR machines will be the saving grace of the industry.
And what exactly is an HHR machine?
So imagine a classic slot machine, the kind you would find in Las Vegas or Atlantic City. The difference is, the kind of algorithm for a spin is based on horse races from history, not pure chance. In any given pull, your bet could be riding on a West Coast Derby race from 1974, betting on some horse called the Bee's Knees. Of course, there's been hundreds of thousands of races, so mathematically, figuring out which race, what horse, and what time they raced is basically impossible. In Wyoming, only 13 counties have voted to allow gaming machines at all. The historic horse racing machines are in off-site betting locations.
These often have bars and TVs, but mostly resemble mini casinos.
So I understand they're classified differently now, but the slot part sounds a little like a gambling device.
Yeah, well, circa 2003, the city of Cheyenne would agree with you. They had the HHR machines removed for that very reason. And 3 years later, the Wyoming Supreme Court declared them to be gambling devices, which gambling is illegal under Wyoming law. But they're all over the state now. And that's because 7 years after the Supreme Court ruling, lawmakers made some changes and essentially legalized HHR machines as skill-based gaming terminals. Now, lawmakers in the industry at large also took other actions. They promoted events like dog racing, and lawmakers expanded the Gaming Commission so that the administrative and regulatory action could keep up with the growing industry. But the driver of this rebirth has been these skill-based machines, these gaming terminals, as some call them, terminals that are bringing in money at a much faster rate than sitting in front of a television and waiting for a live race broadcast.
Yeah, I saw that cities and towns have made more than $12 million from this so far just this year. But your reporting said there were over 40 off-site betting locations and over 3,000 HHR machines. That's a lot. How do local governments feel about this?
Well, that's what lawmakers are discussing. If your county voted to legalize gaming decades ago, you might not have signed up for thousands of these HHR machines popping up across from your local library. So, lawmakers are working on a bill that would require local approval for simulcasting, a way to give local governments a little more control over new sites. But lawmakers don't want it to be an excuse for town and city councils to pick winners and losers. For Representative Steve Johnson of Cheyenne, he believed that type of less visible corruption on a local level would hurt the market.
I'm a free market guy. I think if 1,000 establishments want to come into Laramie County, let them. Free market is going to weed them out.
Senator John Kolb of Rock Springs responded, saying that's what we have right now.
Because guess what? You have an application right now, and you go before the Gaming Commission, and you go through the process, and you're not a criminal. They shall issue a license, and they have been issuing licenses. They have not denied licenses. The counties have been sued for denying a license. There is no local control.
Lawmakers are going to hedge their bets. They'll review one bill that gives local governments a level of control by basically allowing them to pass or deny new gaming locations through zoning laws. The State Gaming Commission would still retain most of their approval power. The Gaming Committee would also see a second bill where local governments would have more direct power to approve or deny permits.
Okay, so there's a lot going on. Before we wrap up here, what's next for your social media gaming series?
Well, there's also an anti-money laundering bill that's being considered in a different committee, but I'm interested in the mental health impacts on gaming. So in the meantime, I'll be looking into that and see what sort of impact HHR machines and racetracks have on local communities.
Okay, Jordan, we are looking forward to that. And you can find Jordan's series on Wyoming Public Radio's YouTube channel or Instagram. There are some great puns in there. Thanks, Jordan.
Nay, thank you.
In recent years, state capitals have seen a flurry of bills to limit the responsibilities of power utilities that spark wildfires. That's according to a Mountain West News Bureau analysis. This includes Wyoming. Just this past legislative session, lawmakers passed a law limiting utility companies' responsibilities as long as they have a wildfire mitigation plan. The industry wants the protection, but some lawmakers oppose that. Reporter Cameron Sanchez in Phoenix has more.
Sam Drivo and his mother are art lovers. Sam enjoys photography and traveled the world collecting various pieces for their home. His mother, Perry, is a weaver and made her own textiles on wooden looms. They called their home the Art House, but that house and everything in it vaporized in the 2020 Labor Day fires in Oregon.
It was, definitely a gut punch that isn't, it just changes the trajectory of your life.
One of Oregon's largest public utilities, Pacificor, was found grossly negligent by a state jury for starting the fires and had to pay more than $1 billion in settlements. They're now trying to appeal. 2 years prior to that, a devastating fire in California killed 85 people and displaced 50,000. The catastrophe ultimately bankrupted PG&E, California's largest electric utility. Since then, bills began cropping up in state legislatures, all striving to limit utility companies' liability for starting wildfires.
What we're really trying to do is move forward with legislation that really, at the end of the day, in our mind, really protects our customers and really tries to eliminate these just time-consuming and expensive litigation that we're seeing.
That's Eric Gray, Vice President of Government Relations for Edison Electric Institute, which represents all U.S. investor-owned electric companies. Our investigation found 18 of the country's 19 westernmost states have seen similar legislation or policy introduced over the past 6 years regarding utility liability and cost management. And in about half of those states, some version of the legislation became law. Each state considered a different version, ranging wildly in the protections utilities were able to secure. In nearly every state, protections are contingent on utilities following a wildfire mitigation plan, including Arizona. State Senator J.D. Mesnard says he wasn't comfortable giving the utilities the provisions they asked for, like blanket liability and banning class action lawsuits.
My approach was,
You want high protections, you have to have a high threshold. You want low protections, you have a low threshold. They had low threshold, high protection.
Utilities say they need protection because they're vital to everyday life and don't want the cost of settlements passed on to ratepayers. Barry Aarons represents Arizona trial attorneys. He speculates that utilities are really concerned with shareholder exposure.
I really think that it's a little bit disingenuous to throw out, oh my God, we're just concerned about the people of the state and what it's going to do to their utility costs. Well, tell that to a community that burns to the ground.
Utilities argue that they can't control everything, like lightning strikes or overgrown vegetation on federal lands. Wildfire risk is getting worse due to a variety of factors, including prolonged drought, high temperatures, and stormy weather. Our review found utilities were blamed for at least 11 wildfires across the West since 2012 and paid settlements in at least 5 cases, although most of the cases involved denials by utilities. Sierra Club attorney Rose Monahan referred to a letter Berkshire Hathaway CEO Warren Buffett sent to shareholders a few years ago, raising the alarm about wildfire liability. Berkshire Hathaway Energy owns several utilities, including Pacificor. Monahan says utilities are operating with a thumb on the political scale.
If utilities were operating in an open market, they would have the incentive to innovate, to adjust to new market conditions. They wouldn't have the option of saying, can someone just protect me from this and I won't have to deal with this issue?
If there's a wildfire and state legislation protects the utility at fault from liability, then who pays for the damage? In many cases, that would fall to insurance companies, the strongest opposition to utilities' efforts. State Farm insurance lobbyist Greg Van Horsen told Montana legislators expensive settlements would hit consumers.
If we have a problem with recovering costs for burnt down houses in Montana, from an insurance company's perspective, well, then we only have one option.
That option would be to raise the price of insurance for homeowners. Gray, with Edison Electric Institute, says although this utility effort started out focused on the West, utilities are now lobbying for protection at the federal level in the wake of fires from New Jersey to Louisiana.
This issue is becoming more and more, relevant for the entire country.
Meanwhile, other cases drag on. For example, Xcel Energy is, quote, prepared to go to trial over liability in the 2021 Marshall Fire, which burned 1,000 homes in Colorado. Settlements involving thousands of homes across the country are a long way off as states, utilities, and residents argue over who is to blame. For the Mountain West News Bureau, I'm Cameron Sanchez with KJZZ in Phoenix.
Up next, we'll learn about Wyoming Public Media's podcast that takes you adventuring all over the world.
Are you looking for a way to get involved with Wyoming Public Radio? Sign up for our new volunteer platform. Visit our website and click the volunteer button at the top to get started.
Welcome back to Open Spaces. Mark Jenkins was born and raised in Laramie. A world-renowned explorer, acclaimed author, and international journalist, Jenkins has covered the globe for a number of publications, including National Geographic. Jenkins is also the host of Wyoming Public Media's podcast, Going to Extremes, Stories of Adventure. Wyoming Public Media's program director, Grady Kirkpatrick, spoke with Jenkins, starting with what led him into exploration and travel.
First thing I have to say is my dad was a university professor. He got a sabbatical to go to Holland, and I'm one of 6 kids, so we moved to Holland. None of us spoke a word, put in Dutch schools right off the bat. Half a year later, you're speaking Dutch. And so I got an early exposure to international travel. And then in high school here in Laramie High, I was a gymnast, and then I learned how to rock climb from a famous swimming coach, Lane Kapishka. And after that, I went back to Europe, hitchhiked across Europe and Africa and Russia for a half a year with my best friend, Mike Moe, who was also from Laramie, And, we ran out of money 3 months into the trip, which wasn't that uncommon back then. This is in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So we slept in parks and we snuck into college cafeterias. And, a lot of people don't eat everything on their plate. So we just sneak in, and when it would start to roll into the dishwasher, and we grab some buns or something like that. And that's how we got along. Definitely the low life for a little while. Then I came to UW.
Yeah.
And I had a great experience at University of Wyoming. I ended up majoring in philosophy, particularly 20th century existentialism.
Through your explorations over the years, you just have an incredible amount of experiences and adventures. And now you're putting it together in this podcast called Going to Extremes. And kind of what was your inspiration for that?
Yeah, when I got out of college, I realized that American society really didn't want or need a philosopher. So I became a writer. And I wrote my first story for the Casper Star Tribune in 1983. And from there, I just kept working. Then I worked for larger newspapers, Denver Post, and I started working for magazines, Time Magazine. Then eventually I got a column for Outside Magazine called The Hard Way, where I did an expedition almost every month for 10 years. And then after that, National Geographic hired me. Mm-hmm. But now we all know that reading has changed in America. People don't typically read long-form investigative journalism, which was my expertise. So that world vanished. Mm-hmm. But I still had all these stories I'd written for all these magazines, from Atlantic Monthly to the New York Times to Esquire. So I thought, all right, I think some people maybe in Wyoming might enjoy these stories. And that's when I talked to you.
Yeah, and we are glad of it. And tell me about kind of the feedback you've received from Going to Extremes.
I have had really good feedback from across Wyoming. I worked for the University of Wyoming as a writer in residence for a decade, and I went around all the small towns and gave programs, National Geographic programs. So a lot of people out there in Powell and Cody and Jackson Hole, I already know a lot of them.
Oh, yeah.
I'm from here.
It's Wyoming, small town, long street, so everybody knows everybody. And so you've connected with people over many years.
Yeah, so I think I only have positive responses. I mispronounced a couple of words, and somebody called me on that, but that's totally fair. I don't get it right all the time.
We appreciate that, too.
Yeah, exactly.
When we hear from people.
So
we want to get it right. What are some of those specific stories and adventures, I guess, if any come to mind, that people have responded to?
Well, I did a story about I'm one of 4 brothers, and the 4 of us went skydiving all on one day. And my parents were definitely not happy about that. And I got a note from people saying, that's just a little too wild. All 4 brothers jumping out of a plane. The story about Lane Kapishka, my coach, who taught me how to climb, and he died when he was like 47, 48. And I tried to take those skills and teach them to my daughters. Not necessarily that successfully, but I took them up rock climbing in Vidavoo, which most people in Wyoming know where that is. Mm-hmm. And that got a lot of response. My story about Everest, I've been to Everest twice, almost summited the first time, summited the second time. Second time I was on assignment for National Geographic. And Everest has become quite a mess, and I understand it quite well, and had written about how we could fix Everest for National Geographic. That got a lot of positive response.
Yeah. You recently added another notch in your mountaineering adventures. Tell us about that. It was summiting in South America?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a funny story, Grady, because I went down there with 2 good buddies, one of whom I'd climbed in South America with before, and one who I'd climbed with in Tibet. So they're climbers. But on our first peak, one of them got pulmonary edema, which is a swelling, water retention in your brain, and it's very serious. And he got a severe case of that while we're climbing. So he turned around. He ended up going down and flying home. And then my buddy, we were caught in a very deep fog, and he couldn't see well enough with his sunglasses, so he took them off. And you can't, UV light fog does not stop it. So it came straight through, and he got severe snow blindness.
Wow.
So day 3, day 4 on my, 3-week expedition, both my partners have flown home. So I thought, well, this is not the first time this has happened. So I started asking questions and then just started soloing peaks, which I don't advise. I prefer to have a partner. I prefer to be on a rope, but this is not the first time, things have happened in an expedition. So I ended up soloing half a dozen peaks, one of which was the highest peak in Ecuador, Chimborazo. It's not particularly technical. You got to use ice axe and crampons, but it was all well within my ability.
Well, we appreciate the stories people can hear on Saturdays, 8:35 and 9:35, and also online. Tell us about maybe some of the upcoming stories.
I'm sitting here with a cast on my left foot. That story's coming up. I was climbing in the Snowy Range. Some of you will know that area, Lake Marie, Mirror Lake. And there's a big wall there called the Little Diamond. And I pulled up on a block that I thought was solid. And it wasn't. It was about a refrigerator-sized block, and it pulled out. And so I took a very substantial fall and landed one foot in the snow, which was wonderful, but the other foot hit. So it shattered my heel. So I've got a plate and 10 screws. And just how that happened is a story coming up. The story you asked me about Ecuador, also coming up.
Yep.
The story about rafting the Nile River in Uganda, coming up. Yeah, I've got some fun stories.
Seems like the adventures never end. And I think the prognosis from what you told me is pretty good. Your recovery's going well, and we really like hearing that, I'm sure.
Yeah, thanks. I'll be back. I just can't be back real soon.
All right. Well, good to have you on Going to Extremes. Mark Jenkins, thank you so much. Been a pleasure.
Thanks, Grady.
Thank you for listening to Open Spaces. The entire show and all the stories you heard here can be found on our website at wyomingpublicmedia.org. It can also be found wherever you get your podcasts, and we post all our stories on the station's social media platforms. Those include Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, X, and Blue Sky. Thanks to Hannah Haberman, this episode's audio producer, and Ivy Engel, our digital producer. And finally, Cody Hume, our social media manager for today's show. Open Spaces is a production of Wyoming Public Radio News.